Introducing LT Defense Tactical Gear, your ultimate solution for top-notch protection and performance in the field. Our armor bundles provide unmatched safety and comfort, while our battle belts and holsters ensure quick and easy access to your gear. Stay prepared for any situation with our high-quality medical supplies, designed to keep you ready for action at all times. Looking to enhance your skills? Our firearms training programs will take your proficiency to the next level. Trust LT Defense for all your tactical gear needs and gear up for success on the battlefield.
This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Military, I'm a certified financial social worker. I was in the Air Force for 14 years, and then I paid off $20,000 of debt while I was active duty within 3 years as an E3. So that's kind of like I got really into personal finance, and so I've been really passionate about that ever since. And that was 10, 12 years ago now. So since then, I became a social worker, and now I'm a certified financial social worker. So we kind of get into, dealing with finances, but then also kind of dealing with the psychology behind finances, like the mental side of things. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, your battle buddy when it comes to finances, please welcome the fire social worker, Joey Laswell.
All right. Hey, hello, everybody. This is Money in the Military on Military Broadcast Radio. Wanted to say I'm excited to be here today. Got a special guest, a continuation from the last session that we had. Our good friend, Tony Hollinsworth from another co-host or a host of his own show inside the Hoosier Mind on Military Broadcast Radio. So Tony, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you? Appreciate you having me on. I know we haven't really got to talk a whole lot as far as like one-on-one conversations. So this is kind of a good introductory path.
Yeah, I like it. I really appreciate your sense of humor. You've jumped in on a few of my streams, added some nice color commentary. So I really appreciate that. So just real quick, tell us a little bit about your podcast and what time can we catch you on that show?
So I primarily do a sports podcast here on MBR. I primarily cover the NFL, college football, and college basketball, even though I've been a terrible college basketball fan because I have not watched much of the games this season so far. But you can catch me just about every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern here on MBR.
All right. And I'm guessing inside the Hoosier Mind, so you're a big Hoosiers fan, I'm assuming?
Not necessarily, but it's kind of weird. Whenever I would meet people from across the world, primarily when I was across the world and I'd meet somebody from Indiana, they're like, I'm kind of shy about being a Hoosier because we're a flyover state. Like, I'll admit it. There's not a whole lot here in Indiana other than the Indy 500 once a year. But I wanted to kind of highlight that I'm proud to be from Indiana. Like, I don't feel like a whole lot of people highlight that they're Hoosiers. So, yeah. And of course, the story of where does the term Hoosier really come from? And there's two stories, but neither one of them are truly like confirmed. So,
okay. Yeah, I just remember, was it the Gene Hackman movie Hoosiers? Is that pretty accurate as far as, does it capture the Hoosier spirit?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good, good.
100%.
Awesome. So that was Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. So everybody, if you're checking in, listening to this show, this is kind of like a crossover show, like in the comic books. So just yeah, just we so Tony had chimed in on the previous stream and had commented on a story that he had where he basically paid off a good amount of debt in a very short period of time. And I was just like, oh, we got to have you on the show and kind of have you tell the story. I'm really curious to learn about that. But before we get into that, let's just get a little bit to know, my audience to get to know you a little bit.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about your military background, and then I guess how did you get into podcasting?
So I was in the Air Force for 8 years. I was active duty. So I joined in 2014 and I just got out in 2022. And when I first joined, I joined in a very unique way. So I was originally supposed to be a 2T2. For anybody who doesn't know Air Force jobs, I was supposed to be air transportation. And initially, when I first heard it, I'm like, so this is kind of the Air Force's version of like UPS, FedEx. Like they handled a lot of logistics, a lot of cargo, a lot of boxes. And I was like, I'm looking for something maybe potentially I could do better on the outside that isn't, UPS, FedEx, or
Yeah.
Amazon.
Mhm.
So in order to kind of relieve myself of that, I happened to get lucky, and the Air Force Honor Guard out of Washington, D.C. was doing a recruiting trip there at Lackland Air Force Base. So I interviewed with them. I happened to get accepted, and part of the little honey that they brought out to try to attract you to join was you could pick any AFSC that didn't have a prerequisite that needed to be met beforehand. So as long as I didn't need to have like a top secret clearance or be an absolute like computer genius or anything like that, I could pick that job. So I joined the Air Force Honor Guard for my first 4 years.
Wow.
I did funerals at Arlington National Cemetery for 2 years of my time while I was there. So Monday through Friday, I would be doing funerals. And then while I was there, I got the opportunity to do public affairs for the Secretary of Defense's office. So
Wow.
all I did was public speaking. And
Mm.
it was essentially I had to memorize a 33-page script verbatim. I had to learn how to say it while walking backwards throughout the entire Pentagon,
Wow.
and be able to pick up where I left off, just have conversations with people, just make them feel as comfortable as possible and teach them about the military, how it worked, all the branches. And then I ended up crossing over, becoming a medic in 2018, which is where my financial story starts to kick into place, but we'll touch on that.
Okay.
And I got into podcasting right before COVID started
Okay.
because I thought, wow, I hear all these people like they're working from home, like, they're going to have a lot of spare time. And me being a goober, I'm like, oh, I'll have time to do this. Little did I forget, I'm a medic and in the military. I didn't have no time for that. So
Right.
I started technically in 2020, but I didn't really start getting more consistent with it until 2021. I had a really good friend before I joined that he and I would just talk sports all the time. And it was, we would talk sports from like a very neutral perspective. He was a fan of a team, but he liked and appreciated other players and how other teams did things and kind of enjoyed watching them. And so that's kind of where I adopted it. And I didn't really meet a whole lot of people like that in the military. So I was like, well, I want to podcast about it. I want to meet other people that like to talk about this too. And it's just took off since then.
That's awesome, man. So when did you join MBR?
I joined MBR April of this year, actually. So
Okay.
April of 2024.
All right. So yeah, you're actually not too far ahead of me. I think I joined my first broadcast was in June on MBR. So, all right. Well, that's cool. And I mean, it sounds like from your Air Force experience, like, I guess podcasting is a natural transition. Like you seem to be good at talking, and so that's really awesome. And it sounds like that was a really cool experience, a one of a kind experience that very few people can say they had the similar experience. So,
oh, 100%. I'll never forget like the memories, the connections I made from that. And I will say, as somebody, believe it or not, outside of podcasting, I am 1,000% a massive introvert. Like if you catch me outside, I will probably not say a word to hardly anybody.
Same way. We're not that far apart from each other because I'm pretty much the same way. But well, yeah, thanks for kind of giving us some backstory. So we had mentioned um, your financial story. It's kind of got some ups and downs and some crazy stuff. It sounds like, but I haven't heard it yet. But I'm really excited and curious to learn more about it. So yeah, just give us a little bit of background of what set up this whole journey, and then we can kind of just take it from there.
So really the background is, so kind of like I said, I didn't start off with a normal Air Force job. I started out as the Air Force Honor Guard, and you can only do that for roughly about 4 years. You can maybe give or take a little bit, just depending on circumstances and situations, if you're waiting to retrain. And for us coming out of boot camp, we have to retrain into something different to have a technical skill. Now, if you come in what they called prior service, so say you were a senior airman with like a line number to staff, or you were an officer and you come in, you still do it just for 4 years, because any longer than that you're considered basically like stale out of your current AFSC, and they're like, yeah, you've been out of the game a little bit too long, don't know if we could still use you.
Right.
So my time for retraining came, and to kind of help set it up for anybody who doesn't know the Air Force, if you retrain into a job that is less than 6 months cumulatively, then you are supposed to be sent TDY, or temporarily. You're supposed to be able to get your housing for the base that you're currently stationed at. And obviously, the Air Force would cover all your hotel expenses, everything like that. Instead of sending me TDY, my chief, who was also my career field manager, was not my biggest fan by any stretch. So I was actually PCS'd to the schoolhouse, filling in instructor's billet for a job that I had never officially done for the military. So I was never properly in processed. And as a result, I had to pay for all of my hotels, all of my travel costs, my storage costs, everything out of my own pocket. Couldn't use my GTC, which I'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, that is essentially what started the spiral.
A catalyst. Wow.
Yes.
So that's the origin story of the event. So wow. Okay. So so it sounds like you PCS'd instead of TDY and route, and a lot of this is going to be just complete jargon for most people that might be listening. If you're not a military member or veteran, then you probably were like, I don't know what you're talking about. But essentially, normally the military will cover your costs for moving, and then if not up front, they'll reimburse you for it after the fact. So you may come out of pocket a little bit, but then eventually you get reimbursed and you're whole again. But so what was the what actually happened here in this situation, as far as like where did the debt come into play?
So basically it really all started when I got my notification to retrain. I had filled out the paperwork I needed to fill out, and I submit it back, and they gave me my date of when I was supposed to be at school. Then shortly after, I got my notification of, hey, this is where you're going to be stationed at. I said I was going to be stationed at Lackland. I'm like, oh, don't necessarily want to stay in Texas, but that is what it is. But then I looked at the dates, and the dates were the exact same. So I was supposed to be stationed there at the same time I was starting school. And I thought, okay, well, that's weird. So I reached out and asked, and they're like, my unit training manager, my UTM at the time, she's like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to do. Well, luckily, I had made friends with a master sergeant at the Pentagon, who at the time, his job was to only deal with the PCS assignments of all of the chiefs across the entire Air Force. That was his job. So I was like, hey, I really hate to ask this, I said, but I'm getting no help from my leadership. Can you look into what am I supposed to do? Like, am I going there for school? Am I living there? What am I doing? He couldn't really get any answers, but he got my date pushed back to October. And he said, look, just save your money as best as you can, because you're probably going to end up having to owe them money back. So just save it aside as much as you can, do what you need to do. But in the meantime, you can get your stuff packed. You can kind of hopefully get everything figured out on the way there. Well, I come down to Texas with my orders and my paperwork saying I'm there for school. The coordinator there for the phase 2, which essentially that's all the secondary schooling of like your hands-on training. So you go some places, you have phase 1 to go for your hands-on, or not hands-on, your your book and actual class training. and then you have your phase 2 for more of the hands-on and your technical skill proficiencies. So I go there and I'm like, hey, I have orders here. Here's the paperwork. He's looking at it. He's like, oh, that's kind of weird. And it didn't really seem to fully register with him, but he's like, I'll send it up to the civilian. He'll figure it out. Yeah. In the meantime, I had already paid for my hotel that I was staying in at the time. And I had already paid for my storage. I used a storage pod. So I paid the initial deposit on that. And then I was paying a monthly rate on it. So it would stay in an indoor climate controlled area. So all this is accruing, and I'm like, hey, is there any update as to what we're doing so I can stop paying all this? And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. Just keep doing whatever you're doing. I'm like, but this really hurts my wallet. This is this is starting to hurt a little bit.
Absolutely.
And this accrued all the way up through phase 1 when I was in Texas, all the way through phase 2 when I was in Ohio, and then when I finally got stationed in Ohio, I finally had to stop paying for hotels, but then I had to start working. Then I had to start paying off the debt that I had accumulated throughout that entire time.
Wow, man, it's. I mean, like just knowing the ins and outs and how complicated PCSing can be. It doesn't surprise me that happened, but it's still pretty odd that happened. But that's really cool. We're gonna take a quick little break, a musical break, and then we'll get back into like what your like when the dust settles. Like what was your game plan? How did you and then maybe we can talk some numbers and stuff too. But yeah, we're gonna jump into my usual intro musical guest, which is Noah Peterson, U.S. Marine Corps veteran in San Antonio. So here is Noah Peterson. We'll be right back.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
All right. We are back. This is Money in the Military. We are live on Military Broadcast Radio, talking with fellow MBR host, Tony from Inside the Hoosier Mind, who has a show Tuesdays at 6 p.m. on the multiple platforms for MBR. And just glad to have you on. We were before the break, we were talking about his roller coaster of a financial journey that was basically not it was not his fault, but he had to kind of deal with it. So yeah, before we left off, you were telling us about how, basically you finally didn't have to stop paying for, or you didn't have to pay for the hotels and stuff anymore, but you were left with the bill, right? So
Yep.
what was what was the damage? What was your initial thoughts, and what was your game plan at that stage?
So I kind of took some pre-measured steps that I didn't expect to really help me, but it ended up being a pretty major tool later on.
Mhm.
So right before I left, USAA had actually sent me an offer for a $10,000 limit credit card
Mhm.
with 0% interest for 2 years, and I was like,
Wow.
"Ooh, that would be really nice for
Yeah.
right before I move." Because
Mhm.
again, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna pay for my moving and stuff up front." So I was like, that'll be nice to kind of have. I can
Mhm.
reimburse it, pay it off, and then
Yeah.
everything will be great. Come to find out, that helped me overall, because that's what I had started to put the hotel bills and everything like
Oh,
that
okay.
on.
Mhm.
So ultimately, what I ended up doing was I when you first move down to Texas, for anybody who doesn't know, you have to kind of pay is similar to a state tax in Texas for the first 30 days. After 30 days, you're considered a resident of Texas, and then you essentially get what is like a state tax return from them of all the taxes that you paid.
Hmm.
So the hotel I was staying at, I stayed at the same one the entire time. I just kept extending my stay like another month and another
Mhm.
month and another month. So it would all hit at once as far as my payment for it. I got a little bit of that back thanks to the taxes, and luckily this credit card also gave me cash back rebates, so I was able to pay a little bit of that off. Um,
Nice.
Essentially, where all this money was coming from, was because I was stationed in DC originally. I was still getting DC BAH, but I
Mm.
was living in station in Texas, and I was never
Gotcha.
properly in processed,
Mhm.
so they never changed my BAH rate from DC to Texas.
Oh, gotcha.
So now I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, well, now I'm gonna have to probably back pay them money because they're like
Mhm.
overpaying me BAH. But I'm like, this should cancel out though, because I'm having
Mm.
to pay for all of
Yeah.
this out of
Right.
pocket.
Yeah.
Um, so essentially what I did was I would get the credit card racked up pretty significantly, and I would put about, because BAH was about 1,700 a month. I would put about $500 a month in my savings, and then I'd put the rest all towards that bill, and I would just start hitting it each and every month that I could. Save a
Mhm.
little bit, pay a little bit of it off, save a little bit, pay a little bit of it off. I ate pretty cheaply while I was there. A lot of packets of tuna, a lot of Vienna
Mhm.
sausages out of a can, a lot of
Mhm.
microwavable mac and cheese and like White Castle bites. But yeah, all total with the moving costs, the hotel costs in both Texas and Ohio, and the storage cost, you were looking at roughly anywhere between about 25 to $30,000 of
Mm.
debt that I had
Wow.
to that I had to eat
Yeah, man. I mean,
as an
yeah,
E4.
as an E4, yeah, that's
As an
painful.
E4.
Um, and were you were single at the time, or were you,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so that
Mhm.
makes it a little bit easier, but then you're not making as much money as the married people,
Right.
really, but, um, okay, so that's pretty, I mean, it sounds like a pretty solid plan, in general, but, like, what were some of the, you said you kinda cut down on food costs, but, was there
Mhm.
anything else that you did to kinda grease the wheels or get the, the money coming in?
I guess what really helped me was the because the hotel cost kind of fluctuates
Mhm.
because of the fact of the time I went there. So I went there actually late October, early November. So I kind of had to deal a little bit with the holiday prices because they would
Mm.
upcharge a little bit. But then after December, so I was there from uh, basically beginning of November through April. January through April is actually not that bad. And
Mm.
the other thing you have to remember too, I didn't have an internet bill. The
Mm.
only bills I really had was a car payment, my insurance, and my cell phone bill. Other than that, everything else was basically all included with the hotel that I was
Mhm.
living at. Now I
Okay.
did have my 2 pets with me, but that
Oh.
wasn't any. I had
Mhm.
already kind of stockpiled up on food for them before I left because I was like, I don't know if
Nice.
I'll be able to get this when I get there, so I'll at least have me a little bit of supplies prepared
Yeah.
before I do that.
Wow. That's crazy. Um, so how long did it take for you to actually kind of get the debt knocked out? Pretty relatively quickly, right?
Yeah, it took me about 8 months to really get it knocked down, and a
Mm,
lot of that was due to the fact of I was still getting that DCBAH, and luckily moving from Texas to Ohio, the cost of living was significantly cheaper in Ohio
mm,
than it was there. So I was able to put a little bit more money towards that. I did dip a little bit into the savings just to get it knocked out quicker, but that
mhm.
was also kind of the advantage of having that 0% interest. I didn't have to worry about that. And
Yeah.
because I had been racking up so much, but then paying so much off, I actually got a lot of that cash back value
Mm,
from that USAA rewards. So I was able to knock about 2,500, 3,000 off just in like the cash back rewards and stuff too. So that
nice.
helped also tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all those little things add up for sure. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's one of those things too. A lot of, if you use credit wisely, you can, if you're going to spend that money anyways on gas and groceries, things like that, you pay it
Right.
off at the end of the month. That's essentially like free money. But I caution some people to think of it like that, like if you're
Mhm.
managing your credit smartly and, with focus, then yes, you might as well, put it on credit and then pay it off at the end of the month.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so that's pretty man, I'm just still blown away by the numbers and the dedication that probably took for you. Um, so it sounds like you also had some good financial habits maybe prior to that, where you had a
Mhm.
savings account, like you
Yeah.
you know you had some decent financial habits. Um, so did you learn that on your own, or did you have that kind of coming into the military, or where
I
did you learn that
funny
stuff?
enough, funny enough, I had like $0 in my savings prior to all of this. So this actually kind of forced me to be like, okay, you have to save money. You can't just
Mm,
use this to play with. And it was also one because I had actually learned it a little bit from mom of
okay.
you try to pay off, and she learned it from I believe Dave Ramsey, or is it whoever gives the really good financial advice? That's a big radio guy.
Yeah,
Uh,
Dave
is it
Ramsey.
is it Dave Ramsey? Pay off pay off your small things first. That way you can start hitting your real big things. And like I
Right.
said, I had my cell phone bill was pretty low. I did have a car payment, but that wasn't a huge chunk of my paycheck. Luckily, I had refinanced that
Mm,
to actually a lower payment, but I was still paying like normal, so that
mhm.
way I could pay it off quicker. Um, and that's really just how I kind of treated it. Of I need to put a little bit back to save. I ended up actually saving about 5 to 6 grand out of that because
Wow.
again that DCBAH helped.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I said, those hotel fluctuating prices and whatnot helped me
Mhm.
pretty tremendously too. Plus, I had a 2012 Ford Fusion, so gas really didn't hurt me too bad either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I said, that having to maybe get a little bit lower quality in food, but saving the
Mm,
cost of I'm not eating out as much. I'm not,
yeah.
spending as much money. I really didn't have a kitchen to cook in, so I'm not having to pay a whole lot as far as groceries and whatnot
Mhm.
go either. So that kind of helped me quite a bit too, as far as basically nickel and diming it to the lowest bit. And
Yeah.
I had always been raised to, as much as name brand usually looks better and maybe it tastes a little bit better, off brand stuff usually tastes really close, if not just as good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's one of those cost saving things that people, you know, they probably don't even think about it,
Hmm.
but they just think, oh, I'm going to get the name brand stuff. But really,
Yeah.
yeah, like the generic stuff is usually just as good, if not, the same
Hmm.
as the name brand stuff, just way cheaper.
Yeah.
Um, so we got a couple comments. I got some emojis coming through. Alien ghost, alien ghost, alien ghost. Okay, so that's from Into the Weeds.
Yep.
Amber Dietz, co-host there. We got
Hmm.
Joel, some fire, dropping some fire, and some money emojis. Terry Lynch says hello, another MBR host
Hmm.
for the Tracer Rounds podcast, and she confirms that we were talking about Dave Ramsey with
Hmm.
the debt snowball method. Um, so man, like I guess I'm curious to think about, like, so this was kind of like a very difficult time period for you,
Hmm.
financially speaking.
Oh yeah.
But what are some of the good, I guess, the good things that came out of that you kind of take into your current financial situation?
Honestly, I think this is what taught me probably the best as far as how to budget.
Mhm.
And literally all it was I took what do I all total with BAH, BAS, and my base pay, what do I earn each and every month?
Mhm.
Okay, here's my total. And then, all right, let me subtract how much is this month from the hotel bill. Okay, now this is how much I have left. This is from the car payment. This is from the phone. And it was a mixture of, like I said, putting about $500 away in savings. And then, okay, now I have this much money to go to everything else. Now, how
Mhm.
much do I have left out of that? And then whatever that number was, I would usually cut that in half. And that would be the extra bit of money that I would pay to the credit card to also help kind of knock that out a little bit quicker too, that I still
Gotcha.
use to this day. It's like
Yeah.
I take all my income that I get, I take all of my, my income eaters away. And then I see, okay, this is how much money I have left. This is what I can put into savings. This is what I can put to any other credit cards. And again, just learning from mom, like you said, if you use credit wisely, it can be a great tool to kind of help you stretch your money. You're not eating away at it.
Mhm.
I was never one, I never try to get myself in a whole lot of debt. I'd say that as I have a $56,000 Jeep that I'm having to pay off. But
Oh man.
but that's kind of what I've always grown up on is, don't always put yourself in debt.
Mhm.
If you feel that you don't have the money to spend right now, like in hand cash value, just the same, then don't put it on a credit card and, dig yourself
Absolutely.
into that hole.
Yeah, because it's like a death by a thousand cuts. Like
Hmm.
those little purchases that really, the sneaky ones, really can add up really quickly. And it's a lot of times people rationalize it because it's like, oh, it's just $9 from Amazon, or
Hmm.
like they just have their card linked to their Amazon account. And I've been guilty of this too.
Hmm.
But it's just like a mindless thing where you're just like, oh yeah, we need this thing, so I'll just go on Amazon and then it'll be here in 2 or 3 days.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those things you got to be really careful about debt because it's very sneaky.
Hmm.
Sometimes not so sneaky. Sometimes it's just right up in your face. It's like, hey,
Oh yeah.
here's a buttload of debt.
Right.
Um, yeah, we got a comment from MJ, another host, from MBR. Thanks for sharing. A good, got some good interaction from the audience tonight.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess I did want to kind of talk to you a little bit more about what is it. Oh, after we'll have to take a little break after this, but maybe we could talk about some of the, like, if you could do it over again, or if you were counseling an airman who was going through your situation, like
Hmm.
maybe some tips and tricks that you learned along the way.
Yeah.
Because this is money in the military. This is a realistic um, financial situation that military
Hmm.
members can find themselves in. So, any way that we can help, that's kind of, that's what we're here for. So,
Yeah.
and then if anyone has any comments or questions for us, please shoot us some questions and we'll answer them on air.
Hmm.
And in the meantime, we're gonna play. Let's see, Andrew Robero. That's kind of like my second always pick. So, bleed red, white, and blue. So we'll be right back after this musical interlude.
Been 10 years since I'd seen his face. Not much had changed, just a different time, different place. When I shook his hand, I knew something had changed. This was a different man from the one I knew back then. That's when he said, "We do the goals." Yes, I stand in line and watch the flag wave with pride. You see, this is what I do. Yes, I bleed red, white, and blue. told me the tales of his journeys far away. 3 times gone and land most only see on the front page. With honor and glory, he stood so tall and fought for you and I, so we could be free from it all. That's when he said, when duty calls, yes, I stand in line and watch the flag wave with pride. You see, this is what I do, yes, I bleed red, white, and blue. When duty calls, yes, I stand in line and watch the flag wave with pride. You see, this is what I do, yes, I bleed. This is what I do, yes, I bleed. Oh, this is what I do, yes, I bleed. Red, white, and blue.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
All right, we are back. This is Money in the Military on Military Broadcast Radio. I'm here with Tony from Inside the Hoosier Mind podcast, also on Military Broadcast Radio, streaming from on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Central Time, or Eastern Time.
There we go.
So yeah, we've just been he's been telling us a little bit of a story about his financial roller coaster ride that he had while he was in the Air Force. Something that anyone who's been in the military and had to deal with military finances can attest that a lot of times the paycheck, it could take months and months and months for it to truly finalize and solidify, because like there's so many things changing, going up and down, and so yeah, it can be challenging balancing that kind of fluctuating income, especially if you're overseas too. You got COLA that changes a lot of times. So yeah, so we did get a comment over the break from Terry. She's giving us some information about if you stay in a hotel for over 30 days in Texas, they rebate the taxes and the hotel will give you a long-term rate. Okay. Some good travel hacking there.
Right.
And then, I was thinking about it, did you get any kind of crazy points for the hotel that you stayed at?
So funny enough, because again, I was paying all this out of pocket, and I was like, I don't really have luxury hotel type money, so I got to live. I stayed in called the extended stays.
Okay.
And depending on state to state you go, those are really nice. The ones I stayed in, my first couple months, I had to spend a lot of money on anti-cockroach products.
Oh,
it was not great. But I couldn't really afford anything else. And the other, there's a couple other sergeants and TDYs that were there. They were staying in this hotel that super nice, 25, 30 minutes away. They're like, why don't you stay here? And I'm like, I can't afford those prices.
Right. Yeah, because you're paying out of your own pocket at that point,
right?
So that's different. It's a different calculus that you had to make.
Right.
So yeah. So I guess knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would do differently, or if you had to basically talk to a young airman or a young soldier and be like, hey, this is a situation that I'm in, because I don't know, it didn't sound like you had a lot of help from this situation. So like, I guess that would probably be the first thing you would do is like have somebody that can vouch for you, like a first sergeant or something.
Yeah,
Um,
I think if I and it's gonna sound really bad, and again, I don't know what would have happened if I went back and done it now. But honestly, I think I would have just denied those orders and said,
mm,
"Look, I'm not leaving until I have a better clarified answer or until everybody is at least on the same page of what we're supposed to do."
right.
Because yeah, so funny enough, so I had been mentioning this every time I was in the schoolhouse to different instructors, to pretty much
Hmm.
anybody that was an NCO or higher. I'm like, look, I'm I'm like floating just barely above water here.
Yeah.
Somebody help me.
Right.
And it was really aggravating as an E4
Mm,
because, while I was the only person in OCPs at the time, the, operational camouflage pattern, and
hmm.
everybody else was in the Tiger Stripe ABUs, I'm like, look, I'm obviously different. Like, I'm not your usual pipeliner. Like, I
Hmm.
kind of somewhat know what I'm doing. Like, help
Mm,
me.
hmm.
Yeah, I eventually they ended up having me write a report while I was there, because I had failed 4 out of 5 tests, and you can only fail
Mm,
up to 5. And they were like, well, now you have to write a report of, do you want to be washed back into a class that is a little earlier in the subjects, or do you want to retrain into something else? Well, like I had mentioned at the beginning, my everything in my PERS, everything through AFPC said I'm already a 4-0. Whether I
hmm.
graduate or not, I'm a 4-0.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there thinking, well, it's going to take y'all a lot of paperwork to cross train me again, and you can't
Hmm.
just force that. So, you know what? I want to cross train, put me into something different, because
Hmm.
obviously you guys just don't care. Luckily, I had a tech sergeant she had been selected for master sergeant, so she was getting a lot more of those responsibilities. Well, she had
Hmm.
read my report before it went to the commander, uh,
Nice.
and luckily she caught that, and she goes, "Wait a minute, what is this E4? This man he's mad. He's
Yeah.
20 in debt. He's a little mad." So she pulled me out of class and she talked to me, and so I explained everything that happened from day one to then. She said, "Okay, give me a couple hours. I'll be right back." And when she came back, she goes, "You are in Air Force limbo. The only things that are definitive is you belong to the Air Force.
Yeah.
We're here at Fort Sam Houston, stationed at a Lackland Air Force Base." It's like, cool.
Mm,
I didn't have a supervisor. The first sergeant at the time, who I had a really big issue with him, uh,
mhm,
to kind of derail the story, and this is where I would tell any airman, soldier, marine, sailor, space force guardian, or
mhm,
coast guardsman, do not do what I did. And
mhm,
um, the first sergeant was doing an internal investigation about a um, other individual who was cross training, who was a sergeant, and he was having what they considered an inappropriate relationship with a pipeliner.
mm,
Everything was completely consensual, but it broke, schoolhouse rules that they were
yeah,
having an appropriate relationship. When I was questioned about this from the first sergeant, I essentially told him, "Look, I don't really care about 2 consensual adults doing whatever 2 consenting adults do.
mhm,
I am $20,000 in debt.
mm,
Why will you not do your job and
mm,
fix me being
mhm,
$20,000 in debt?"
mm.
That was not met with a very good response. So,
Ooh, yeah, that's tough. I mean, at the one in one hand, you gotta advocate for yourself. You gotta,
correct.
but
Mhm.
yeah, that's a
And
tricky one. That's a tricky one.
and that was essentially the where I was at. It was, I didn't have anybody there as far as a supervisor or command to really fight
Mm,
for me. So yeah, it was,
mhm,
I had to fight for myself. I had to rely a lot on previous senior NCOs, previous NCOs, and family friends and whatnot. Of, okay, look,
mhm,
this is the situation I'm in. What would you guys do?
mhm,
And that's what I would tell anybody who would potentially be in that same situation of, go, like you said, advocate for yourself. Ask anybody and everybody that you can if you
mm,
feel that they are any type of smart. And I honestly, I feel like that's one of the positives of social media. Like
mm,
you mentioned earlier about how for the military, there's a lot of times that, those paychecks can take months to get through. I don't know if you saw it on TikTok. There is a Marine that was stationed out in Pensacola. He had joined the Marines back in September. He has been in Pensacola for 2 months now. He has not received a paycheck since September. His entire time. And his mom reached out to a Marine on TikTok who's a sergeant major, and that sergeant major got it pushed all the way up to a 3-star, and he immediately got his money like that. So yeah,
that's crazy. And it's funny, like I've come across this in when I was active duty too, where sometimes you just got to find the right person, like the right person at the right time that's willing to do that little extra step, or you just got to connect to that right person that can make the moves happen. Because I've seen situations where there's some problem is going on for months and months and months, and then all it takes is like that one supervisor or that one NCO that basically goes like a bull in a china shop kind of thing, and just raises all kind of craziness. But yeah, I mean, I really feel bad for you, honestly. I mean, it sounds like it was a really tough situation. It wasn't your fault, and you really were kind of like in this like almost like a purgatory limbo situation in the Air Force, which sadly does happen. Sometimes people fall through the cracks, but yeah, I would imagine doing it over again, or if you were in a supervisor's shoes, that you would have handled that way differently, as a supervisor. If you had been assigned a supervisor, I would imagine that's one of the first things they would try to do. Because I will say, when I was in the Air Force, there were some programs to help people with their finances. There was like the loan Eagle loan or something like that, and you can go to your first sergeant and explain your situation. You have to do a whole budget, and like you have to work for it. But I mean, it was like a loan, like an emergency loan, basically, that the Air Force kind of. I mean, you had to pay it back out of your paycheck. But so yeah, there are some resources out there. I think I give the DoD a little bit of a hard time, just because I saw so many financially illiterate people, and I was like, surely there's something that can be done, for the active duty members. But yeah, it really kind of comes down to like that personal touch, having a direct supervisor or a mentor or somebody that you trust. And it sounds like you at least had some people in your orbit that were able to give you some advice, sounding board, and things like that. But man, such a crazy story. And I guess, well, if you were, like we already said, if you do it over again, but like, have any of those habits kind of carried over, or did you build a savings muscle from that? And now you feel okay? So
Yeah, I definitely started saving a lot more, because it was like, you know what, in case anything does crazy happen and finances, like, actually you owe us all this money back, and then 8 years down the line they'll be like, actually we owe you this money back, and then they'll pay it to me on my deathbed, basically. Because that's how finance loves to work. They take forever. But no, I mean, that did help me as far as like my savings. Like I said, even how I budget to this day is like, okay, what's my total cumulative money? What all is coming out? What all is coming in? What can I afford? And never spending over my means. It is kind of funny, and I don't know if you've ever heard this. I've always heard the most successful, rich, and wealthy people always act as if they have no money to keep that money.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I mentioned that in another stream, The Millionaire Next Door. It's a really good book. I talk about it a few times, but yeah, like they interviewed a bunch of millionaires, and they basically, like, statistically it showed that they drove modest cars, they had modest houses. They were just consistent savers, and they spent within their means, or below their means, and put that extra money away. It's really not rocket science if you really get down into it. It's that psychology piece of it, the shiny object syndrome. There's just so much temptation out there now, that I totally understand. Like marketing, advertising, like their whole job is to take your money.
Yes.
They're really good at that. So you're already up against the wall, in some sense, that you have this whole machine that's trying to take your money from you. But that's just one of those things we gotta be mindful and find that balance, because I think that's one thing that's kind of interesting in the finance community is there's kind of a divide of some people that say, save aggressively, don't spend on frivolous things, and then you've got like I Will Teach You to Be a Rich guy, Ramit Sethi, who talks about you know spend lavishly on the things that you love and that you enjoy and that brings you like brings you happiness, but then cut everything else to the bone.
Yes.
So I kind of like it's a kind of aggressive, but I think it's also goes into finding that balance of spending versus saving, enjoying the moment while also preparing for the future. So that's a tricky balance, and not everyone, not everyone has the patience or self-control to put money away for the future, and it's a muscle that you have to build.
Yeah.
So is there since you've been out, how's your transition been with your finances? Like, as a veteran, would you say finances are better off or about the same, or was there a transition period that was really tough for you?
They're definitely better. I will
Okay.
say the first few months when I got out, because when I would say this to any veteran, if you're about to get out, regardless of rank, when I was first getting out, when I was looking at all the different jobs, when I factored in how much do I need to make, I didn't just take my base pay of what I get every month for my paycheck. I took, I added in that BAS and that BAH of, okay, this is what you're cumulatively actually making. So say, for number's sake, say you make $4,500 a month. You need to figure out of $4,500 a month, let's say you want to work a normal 8 to 5. Okay, divide that by 5 days, divide that by 8 hours a day. This is your rate that you want to try to hit to keep you about in the means that you're making, as it stands right now. So that was a little bit rough because I had done that. It ended up being a little bit less than what I initially planned for, but then luckily I was fortunate enough to get a disability rating from the VA, so that kind of supplemented a lot of that. So then I was back to making, okay, this is about what I was making when I got out to make things a little easier and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. I always caution veterans or military members who are about to get out, and factor in healthcare costs too,
Yes.
because unless you have 100% disability or you have retirement, TRICARE for life, most veterans don't have those benefits. So,
Right.
You're going to have to go into either the healthcare.gov portal and get your insurance, or get it through your employer, but that's not free. So it's just, it's like you got to factor that in, because there's a lot of sticker shock that when I talk to veterans, they think, oh man, I'm only making like 30K a year taxable. But then when they actually do the math like you were doing, when you really add up all the benefits, it's a lot more than people realize. So but yeah, that's good advice to kind of like crunch the numbers before you get out. Don't wait
Yes.
until you're about out the door or already out the door to be like, oh wait, I didn't factor this in, or I didn't think about this. And I know TAPS, they do have a finance portion, and it was, when I did it in 2020, it was decent. I think it had the right components to kind of get people thinking about it. But honestly, they could do a whole week's worth of finance stuff just for transitioning service members.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 days. 3 days will split the difference, because a week might be overkill. You might have some people pulling their hair out. But I mean, it's a necessary thing. I just think that more people coming out of the service just need a little bit more education, or they need a little bit of a push, because they're in that mindset of, I've got all these things taken care of, but you don't have a price tag on them sometimes. So
Right. And that's why, even for me, like, because after that whole fiasco, I was like, okay, I'm kind of dead set on getting out. So from that point forward, I was like, all right, I got to plan on getting out. What do I have to make, what do I have to do? And I would tell any service member that if you're about to get out, and because same thing, when I went through TAPS was really good. I felt like they gave a lot of really good base information, but you only had a week. And then especially if you're doing it close to when you're getting out, you're getting bombarded with so much information. You're only required to take TAPS at least once a year before you separate. You can take that TAPS class as many times as you feel necessary to get through that. And that's what I would recommend people, give yourself a good timeline of, kind of start putting feelers out there for jobs as far as what you feel your resume needs to be worked on. What do you need to fit? Where do you feel like jobs are going to fit at? The cost of living area, the overall cost of living, like you said, with the healthcare benefits, with the BAH and the BAS, what is going to be able to fit in your means financially. Do that as early as possible. That way, if you're 6 months into this, you're like, actually, things aren't really lining up the way I want to. Maybe I ought to re-enlist just to save myself the headache. It may not be what you want to do, or maybe you do the guard or the reserve as kind of a transition in between. That way you can at least keep your tenure, keep your time and everything like that. You're not completely cutting ties. So that's another route that people could do. And I'd strongly recommend the earlier planning, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, you're basically going to throw a whole monkey wrench in your financial world. Plus you got steady paychecks. You've got, it just works so smoothly. Well, not always in your case, but it generally works smoothly. But yeah, so that's some really good advice. We could probably do a whole show on just transitioning out of the military for finances, because that's like I said, it's a lot to process. But I mean, it's also one of the things that you do it once, well, for most people, and then that's it, and then you're just kind of winging it sometimes, even though you have all these people trying to give you really good advice. But man, so Tony, I really appreciate it. Like, we're getting close to time. Any last minute pearls of wisdom that you got from your situation, or anything you want to just tell the world?
Well, to give you a closer, I ended up not getting any of that money back.
Wow.
Because I luckily had a really good first sergeant. I had a chief at Wright-Patterson that helped me get stationed there. He heard the thing. He was, like you said, bull in a china shop, irate that had happened. He's like, thank goodness you handled that better than most E7s that he knew would probably handle it.
Awesome.
I had a first sergeant, put in the package, but then COVID hit, so they took their very sweet time. And then right before I got out, there's another first sergeant took it over, and he dropped the ball, so I ended up not getting anything. But my biggest thing to people, control what you can control in the moment. There's a lot of stuff that's always going to psych you out, whether it's financial, whether it's personal. Just do what you can to keep yourself happy and healthy. Again, if all it is, I can budget a little bit better and I can make this work, do that to be able to keep yourself going. Don't let something like that completely overwhelm and overpower you to keep you from enjoying life, make you miserable, because if we know anything about life, once one thing piles on you, everything piles on after. So just control what you can control and do what you can do on your end, and you'll definitely be much happier.
Nice. I love it. That's some great advice. You turned a difficult situation and you overcame, and you're here to tell the tale. So, and I really do appreciate you coming on and telling your story, because who knows, you might actually help some, young airman or soldier in the similar situation. They'll be like, oh yeah, I saw this, and now I need to talk to my first sergeant, something like that. So hopefully it will resonate with some people. But just thanks for jumping on the stream, and we'll have you on again if you want to come on, and we'll talk some money again. But that's pretty much all I got. That's going to be the end of the stream for the night. But once again, thanks for Tony jumping in, telling his story, and Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Yep.
Check out some great color commentary about the sporting world. So thanks everybody for jumping in. Thanks for all the MBR people, and we'll catch you guys on the next stream.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.